Show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Katie Bowen in the GB newsroom. The Russian Ministry of Defence has accused Ukraine of carrying out a terrorist attack using drones, adding that some participants in attacks against Russian airfields have been detained and that all attacks were repelled. Ukraine said that it's destroyed over 40 Russian nuclear-capable bombers in a bold wave of drone strikes on air bases, calling it a major operation to wipe out Kremlin warplanes. Explosions were reported at sites across Russia, including in the Arctic, with video showing smoke rising from airfields. Ukraine has published a framework for ending its war with Russia today, with Kyiv outlining a 30-day ceasefire, the release of all prisoners of war and a meeting between Putin and Zelensky. Both sides are now heading to Istanbul for talks tomorrow. Back at home, Britain has lost control of its borders. That's the warning from the Defence Secretary after a record 1,194 migrants crossed the Channel in a single day. Migrants, including children, were seen wading into the shallows on a French beach as police watched and later escorted the boats towards the UK. It brings the total so far this year to nearly 15,000, up 42% on this time last year. John Healey blamed the previous Conservative government for chaos in the asylum system and criticised French police for failing to intervene. The Home Office says it will stop at nothing to dismantle the smugglers' business model. 2 people have died and nearly 560 arrests have been made after PSG's Champions League win sparked riots across France. A 17-year-old was stabbed and a man in his 20s killed in a scooter crash during street celebrations. Police used tear gas and water cannons in Paris, where fireworks were hurled at officers and cars set alight. One officer is in a coma after being struck by a firecracker, and more violence is expected as the team holds celebration parades. Britain is bracing for a new era of threat, with £1.5 billion set aside for 6 new weapons factories and munitions spending to triple to £6 billion. Defence Secretary John Healey says it's a clear message to Moscow, warning that the UK is already under cyber attack and that the keyboard has become a weapon of war. A new cyber command will launch to counter daily assaults from hostile states like Russia and China. Long-range missiles and drones will be built here in the UK, with 1,800 new jobs promised as part of Labour's defence overhaul. And the UK is throwing out disposable vapes, with a nationwide ban now in force to curb youth addiction and cut plastic waste. From today, shops and supermarkets can no longer sell single-use devices, as ministers warn nearly 5 million are binned every week. Refillable and rechargeable vapes are still allowed, but in England and Wales, breaking the rules could cost retailers a £200 fine or more for repeat offenders. The government says it's a win for kids and the climate, but critics warn that the ban could fuel a black market and say tougher actions are still needed to stop teenagers getting hooked. You're up to date on GB News. Now, though, it's time for the Camilla Tominey Show, recorded earlier today.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show. The Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey, will join me ahead of the Strategic Defence Review, which is set to be announced tomorrow. Will it adequately address the national security threats we face? And what does he make of GB News footage showing all of those migrants once again crossing the Channel? I'll also be speaking to Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, fresh from his adventures on London Underground. What's his reaction to Lord Hermer's comments and fresh revelations that he approved Lucy Connolly's prosecution? Also, how do the Tories plan to deal with Islamist terrorists in our prisons? Reform UK councillor Darren Grimes, now deputy leader of Durham County Council. He'll be here. What's his reaction to almost 1,200 small boats crossing the Channel yesterday, or indeed migrants on those small boats crossing the Channel with the help of the French police, it seems? Economist Dr Andrew Lillico will be here to cost up Reform UK's policy promises announced by Nigel Farage earlier this week. How do they measure up to Labour's current economic performance? Let's get stuck into the Sunday papers first of all, and joining me to analyse them is former BBC broadcaster Nicholas Owen. Nicholas, lovely to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Let's get into the migrant surge story. It's all over the Telegraph's front page.
It is, yes. It's time for pictures to paint 1,000 words and all that, isn't it? The thing that strikes is Sunday Telegraph front page. There's this migrant boat coming across the Channel, all young men on here. Now, actually, there are other pictures showing 1 or 2 children being lifted in as well, but mostly it's young men coming.
And what are we extrapolating from that,
Well,
Nicholas?
I mean, these people are obviously looking for a better life, yes, and all of that, but the numbers are just getting extraordinary. And the operation yesterday in the Channel was quite amazing. The Border Force couldn't cope. Almost all their boats were out. They had to commandeer fishing boats. And I read somewhere, I mean, this sounds extraordinary, there was a pleasure cruise boat. I don't know who still goes out in the Saucy Sue.
Pleasure cruising on the Channel.
Yeah, I know.
Spotting migrants on your way rather than dolphins.
But this boat was in trouble. This boat was in trouble. It got a hole in it or something. So they were sort of, oh, we need help. I said, sorry, we can't help you, mate. I'm sorry. Fortunately, that boat managed to fix the hole and got back to harbour.
They couldn't help because they're too busy dealing with dinghies.
The whole thing is just incredibly crazy, isn't it? And the other picture, which is going to, I just think, madden people, whatever the arguments, is the French police. 4 burly-looking French coppers standing on the beach, just peering out. I think one of them's got his phone. Yes.
I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it, to think that we've paid them nearly £500 million.
Yes, yes.
To stand and take photographs of migrants arriving or leaving and arriving on British shores. Nicholas Owen, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Defence Secretary John Healey, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Before we get into the Defence Spending Review, which is tomorrow, hello, nice to see you. Can we just talk about these crossings across the Channel? A record 1,200 people confirmed to have arrived at Dover yesterday. In what world, Mr Healey, is this the Labour government smashing the gangs?
It's the Labour government taking some of the steps necessary to deal with what's a complex international problem, and the fact that, in truth, Britain lost control of its borders 5 or 6 years ago. And so when the Tories left office and left government last year, they left the asylum system in chaos, they left record levels of immigration, and the sight we've seen of these small boats over this last 24 hours just underlines and highlights the problem. And what we're doing with the French is a part of trying to deal with these gangs. Well, part of what's necessary is to get the French to intervene when the boats are in shallow waters, not just when they're on the shore. And we've got to a stage now which the previous government just didn't get to, where we've got the cooperation of the French and a new relationship in place. We've got the agreement of the French that they will start to intervene in these shallow waters, not just on the shore. And our work now with the French is to get this into operation, because what we have seen is these smugglers setting to sea down the coast and arriving in these shallow waters to pick people up like a taxi. We've got to end that, and that's part of smashing the gangs, reducing the small boats, as well as getting on top of the asylum system.
Sorry, just on the French, I mean, we've paid the French 480 million. Actually, interceptions are down under this Labour government. In 2023, the French were intercepting 47% of crossings. Last year, they were intercepting 45% of crossings. This year, they're only intercepting 38%. So what on earth have we given them £500,000 for? £500 million, in fact.
Well, it's not just about payment. It's not just about payment. This highlights the fact that it's a question about powers, and it's about the French police having the new powers to be able to deal with these migrants and these boats when they're on the water, in those shallow waters, not just on the shore. And if we get that operation in place, it will start to help. And you talk about the cost, 700 million under the last government of the Rwanda scheme, and just four volunteers and 700 million of taxpayers' money.
Well, you don't know if it would have been a deterrent because you scrapped it before you'd even tried it. If Rwanda was in place now, you might not have 1,200 people arriving by dinghy yesterday.
It was a failed scheme. It was hugely expensive. It wasn't working. We scrapped it, and we've been able to use that money to clamp down on those people who should not be in this country. And so that's why you've seen since the election 30,000 people deported for this country because they have no right to be in this country. And that's at a level we haven't seen for years.
Can you comment on this story, Mr. Healy, on the front of the Sunday Telegraph headlined, the Sunday Times, British fighter jets to carry nuclear bombs?
Well, when we produce the Strategic Defence Review and publish that tomorrow, you'll see it set out the way that we are in a period of new threats. And my job as Defence Secretary, and our job as a government, our first duty as a government, is to make sure that we keep this country safe. Now, I'm not going to comment on the detail of that story, and those sorts of discussions must remain secret between allies, not in public. But I will say this about the nuclear deterrent that the UK has. It has been the ultimate guarantee of our safety for more than 70 years. It is what Putin fears most, and the UK is the only country that fully commits its nuclear deterrent to the protection of other NATO allies. And strong deterrence is essential to keep our people safe, our country safe, and the alliance safe as well.
OK, so you're not denying that story. That story, the contents of it are roughly true, but no final decisions have been made.
You'll read more tomorrow in the Strategic Defence Review about the risks that we face, about the new nuclear risks that are rising. But I'm not going to comment on that story today. And these are discussions which are not conducted in public and should never be conducted in public.
OK. Can you give us some more clarification of why you have said the keyboard has become a weapon of war?
I've been quite shocked by this, to be quite honest. I took over as Defence Secretary 10 months ago, and in the last year, defence across the range has been the subject of 90,000 attacks, cyber attacks, that are linked to other states. Now, with that level of aggression, that level of threat, it's quite clear that the keyboard has become a weapon of war, and it's one of the reasons that in the last couple of days I've made the commitment that we'll put £1 billion into the digital upgrade of our armed forces so that we can link AI, autonomy and drones to the hard metal of tanks and artillery and planes. But also we'll establish a new cyber command to try and deal with these threats. And alongside that, of course, I want to make sure, and the SDR will set this out, how the record increase in defence investment that we're putting in, from a diversion of overseas development aid money brings a defence dividend with more jobs, more support for British business right across the UK.
OK, when we think of cyber threats, I think we instantly think of Russia and China. And the audience will think there's a contradiction in government policy here. On one hand, to plough this £1 billion into trying to fight cyber threats, and on the other, spending £30 billion worth of taxpayers' money over the course of the next decades, giving away the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, who in turn are linked to China and Russia.
Diego Garcia is a very special base that we share with the Americans. It is fundamental to our and their intelligence and defence. It has an airfield and a deep water port that allows our nuclear-powered submarines and our carrier to dock. It allows us to deploy armed forces around the world. And we had to secure, it was jeopardised, the future of that base was jeopardised in the few years ahead. And this was the only way, and it is the most effective way, of securing the operational sovereignty for Britain of that base for the next 99 years and beyond. It's a good deal for our armed forces, it keeps Britain safer, and that's why it has the support from the US, it has the support from India, it has the support from the UN as well.
But what about that clause in the contract which says that we have to automatically intelligence share with Mauritius? Aren't you concerned about their close relationship with China and Russia and what information Mauritius might actually share, which might not be in our national interest?
There's no clause like that in the treaty. In fact, what there is in the treaty is not just the total operational control of Diego Garcia for the UK, but a 20-mile exclusion zone that allows us to stop Chinese or any other hostile activity, and a lock on the development and any activity on the wider islands up to around 100 nautical miles. This is a way that we protect what is an essential intelligence and defence base for us and for our closest ally, the United States.
But there is a clause in the deal which puts a duty on the British to tell the Mauritian government of any attack on another state conducted from Diego Garcia. That's been said by some in the intelligence community to be a massive gift to Beijing.
They're entirely wrong about that. Look, we have total operational freedom and sovereignty. We will do for 99 years and beyond. In the treaty, it requires us expeditiously as possible to let the Mauritians know if we've used the base for military activity. We can do that. We can do that, and we will, but it protects our ability to operate from Diego Garcia. It protects the ability of the US as our closest allies to continue to keep this absolutely essential base where we conduct operations that we could not conduct and the US could not conduct anywhere else in the world. That's why it's so important, both to the safety of UK citizens. It's been the place in which we've disrupted and broken up terrorist cells, attacking Britain as well as attacking our troops deployed around the world. It's the way that we are able to deploy our forces safely across the world as well, and it's an essential element of that special closeness between the US and the UK on intelligence defence.
Very final quick question, Defence Secretary, maybe just a yes or no answer will expedite time. Was it acceptable for the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, to describe Reform UK and Tories advocating leaving the ECHR as akin to Nazis?
No, he's apologised for it. It's a mistake.
Should he resign?
He's recognised exactly what you say.
OK. All right. Defence Secretary John Healey, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's News Channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GBNews family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
100 years young, and you took part, of course, in the World War II.
Yes.
But you were a Wren. Tell us about what you did to help keep the country safe from Nazis.
Well, I did my best. Well, I was so determined that the Germans weren't going to come into our country, the Nazis. And, you know, we all felt the same. We were so angered that they should dare to even think of coming into our country. They'd bombed London like crazy, and they hadn't got it. And we fought them back, and we fought them to the coast, and then we pushed them over into France, and we pursued them there.
It is you back in your service days. Tell us your happiest memories of those wonderful times.
Oh, good heavens. I just think it was meeting people from other parts of Britain and other types of people, you know, different backgrounds, for example. And it was just so releasing of ourselves. And we were dying to push the Nazis back so that they couldn't conquer. It wasn't the German people. They were suffering as badly as we were. But it was just, we were so determined in England then. It wasn't Britain. We were fighting for England, the Welsh were fighting for Wales, and the Scottish were fighting for Scotland.
GB News.
This is our country, and we think it's amazing. From high tea to the high street, we love it all. Even the rain, we like that too. There's nowhere else we'd rather be. That's why we're here to be the fearless champion of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we are GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Joining me now is the economist and executive director and principal of Europe Economics, Dr. Andrew Lillico. Lovely to see you this morning, Andrew. So we've had to slightly shift the show around because we were late to speaking to the Defence Secretary, John Healey. Let's just have a look at reforms announcements this week. Do Nigel Farage's figures actually add up? Because they're pledging £80 billion in tax cuts. How's it actually going to work?
Well, I don't think it really matters whether numbers add up at this point. We're talking about things which an incoming reform government might do in 2029. That's going to be a very different world. That's going to be a world in which humans have walked on Mars, in which AI dominates every workplace, in which if China is going to attack Taiwan, it will have done so, and in which the UK may between now and then have faced the fiscal crisis. So I don't think that it's I mean, imagine if people had made policies in 2006 and sought to have them in great detail for what would have happened in the after the 2010 general election. It would have been a nonsense. So I think that that's a flawed criticism of what they've been doing here. They're clearly trying to paint a picture of the kinds of things which they're likely to prioritise when they come into government. Because the world will be very different. It's unclear exactly how many of them will be relevant for them to do at the time. But that's the way of thinking about these things. I don't think any opposition party under these circumstances should be seeking to provide a detailed programme where every line item adds up as if they were going to be implementing them all tomorrow.
But Dr. Lillico, are you saying that because of the nature of the changing world and indeed our ageing population, that the electorate must just get used to high tax and spend policies because anything alternative just simply isn't economically viable?
Absolutely not. I would say almost the opposite. I think that we've been living in a fantasy world for the past 15 or 17 years, ever since the global financial crisis of 2008, and that we've steadfastly refused to accept the idea that we're poorer than we were in the past, and we have to therefore adjust the amount of spending which we do on things like health and on pensions. But that kind of thing, I think, is going to eventually be imposed upon us. There's no political appetite at the moment for addressing that reality. In the end, though, we may find that markets impose that upon us by refusing to lend the government any more money. And that might well happen quite soon, even before the next general election.
But hang on a minute. I mean, successive governments are responsible for government spending going up. Let's just look at the benefits bill. And that's why what Farage said in the week was intriguing. His suggestion that he'd not only overturn the cut to winter fuel, but also end that two-child benefit cap. That's an extraordinary thing for somebody purporting to be on the right to say, when we know the benefits bill has shot up by a staggering £86 billion in the last decade.
It's absolutely the case. The reform has adopted this kind of economic populism, which is quite common around the world. Trump has done some similar things. It's popular across much of Europe, where the way in which we used to think about what the right thought on economic questions is that's like 10 years ago way of thinking about what the right does. The right these days favors a different set of agendas. It prioritizes cultural issues, things to do with immigration. On the side of the economy, I think that they may well be end up wanting, at least in principle, to spend in many areas, just as much as the left would. The things which they say they're going to do, of course, is to save some money on doing less on the way of dealing with the environment, doing less in the way of dealing with diversity, equality and inclusion issues. I think it remains to be seen whether they'll get anything like the amount of reductions which they talk about at this stage in doing that. And I think that's quite implausible, their numbers on that count. But they will have to find something. I think in the end what will happen is that markets will force us to spend less on health and education unless we find a way to make our economies grow faster. And it could be that the latter happens because, as I say, the world is going to be very, very different in 4 or 5 years' time. It could be that AI and space tech and green tech and cancer vaccines and who knows what make the economies grow faster. That's a bit of a Hail Mary pass for governments at this point because they're in really bad trouble fiscally. Many governments around the world are, but the UK, I think, is in a particularly bad position. And politics doesn't really have an answer to all of this. What we're doing at the moment is relying on a hope that technology addresses for us the problems that our politics is unwilling to deal with. And I think that's weak, but that's unfortunately the reality we've faced for some time.
You've been speaking in quite long-term way about the kind of future of our economy and indeed our politics. Just to think more short-termism for the moment and looking ahead to the autumn budget, we've got a situation where the Chancellor Rachel Reeves has got a very minimal amount of fiscal headroom compared to some of her predecessors. We've got a situation where the jobs market seems to be drying up. Yes, we had that unexpected growth in Q1, but that hasn't accounted for so-called awful April. We've got inflation having shot up to 3.6%, I think it was, in the last couple of weeks. What's your prediction for how the economy will perform over the course of the next 6 months?
I think it's most likely that we'll see some reduction probably see a contraction in GDP in at least one of the next 2 quarters. Quite a bit of that boost that we saw in the first quarter was probably driven by importers and exporters trying to get in ahead of the Trump tariffs. So There was an element of that. And I think that that's just going to mean less output later in the year. It doesn't actually increase the output, it just shifts it around during the year. It's also been the case, I think, for the past few years that the first quarter of the year, ever since COVID, has tended to be stronger than the years after. So I think that there's some statistical things which would bore your listeners about seasonal adjustments not being quite right at the moment. So I think the reality is that there'll be a reduction probably in one of the next 2 quarters. Rachel Reeves' position is very, very difficult. She has very little credibility now. A number of her key flagship policies are already being U-turned on by Starmer. She seems to be very very unpopular internally in the Labour Party, teetering on the brink of being dismissed all of the time with the discussions about that. She has absolutely no scope to raise taxes any further, though she may well try. She may raise rates, but that doesn't mean that the amounts of the total tax take in terms of pounds is going to go up. The economy is already in a situation where we're chasing away the wealthier people who pay much of the tax. We see that in the statistics. The economy is likely to grow slower if she tries to put taxes up even further. And I think we're well into the doom loop phase here for economies.
All right, I wish we could end on a more positive note, Dr. Lillico, but there we have it. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning.
Good evening and welcome to a GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, it's going to be drier on Monday, but turning wet and windy later on, and then rather changeable as we head through the rest of the week. So we've got low pressure across the north, but out towards the west, a ridge of high pressure is going to be building on Monday to help settle things down. So there are still some showers around this evening and overnight, chiefly across Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Wales, but they'll generally start easing as we go through the night, so plenty of clear spells and lighter winds, and there's a chance of seeing the northern lights further towards the north, turning chilly in places but milder across the south, lows 6 to 11 degrees. So as we start Monday morning, actually a bright start across eastern parts of Scotland, plenty of sunshine here, cloudier out towards the west with a few showers, but generally most places waking up to a dry start. Northern Ireland, plenty of sunny spells to start the day. There will be a few showers just running into Wales, but elsewhere across much of England and Wales, it is a fine dry start with plenty of sunshine. So as we go through the morning and into the afternoon, actually the focus for any showers are going to be across parts of Yorkshire and East Anglia as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere, plenty of sunny spells on offer, but the sun will turn increasingly hazy as we go through the afternoon across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, in association with this area of low pressure. We have a brisk breeze as well developing, so cooler here, but in the sunshine feeling pleasant. Through Tuesday then, we have heavy spells of rain and strong winds moving their way south and eastward, so lingering across southeastern England. Behind that, it is a case of sunny spells, frequent blustery showers, some of these heavy, possibly thundery, even with some snow on the Scottish mountains. Then it remains rather changeable with further spells of heavy rain on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Joining me now is the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, fresh from his antics on the London Underground. Your critics, Mr. Jenrick, suggest that you're just politically performing and posturing and that you didn't carry out a risk assessment before you started confronting fare dodgers in the week. What's your response to that?
Well, good morning, Camilla. Good to be back on your show. Look, I think sometimes you just got to get stuck in. You can make speeches in Parliament, you can write articles, and look, I do all of those things, but you've got to get out there and shame sometimes the authorities into action. And I was fed up, and clearly by the reaction to this video, millions of people were fed up seeing a small minority breach the rules, not paying for their fare. It makes people feel like mugs that they are. And so hopefully this will push the do-nothing Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, into taking action, getting his enforcement officers out on the London Underground and actually stopping some of these people so that we can bring down fares for everyone else.
Have you heard anything from the Mayor of London in response to this, or anyone in power at City Hall with any control over fare dodging? No.
No, well, the only thing I have heard is that they criticise me for not getting permission to go and film. So that, I think, says it all about the organisation. Look, there's obviously good people who work for TfL, but they are really led by donkeys in Sadiq Khan. We've got to get the situation fixed. And it's bigger than just this one issue, isn't it? It's graffiti on public transport. It's an obnoxious music being played by people who should be wearing headphones. It's having your mobile phone nicked. It's shoplifting. It's tradesmen having their vans broken into and their tools stolen. There's a general sense in the country right now that the public realm is being degraded, that people are not taking seriously so-called minor crimes, but ones which actually have a profound impact on people's lives. And if it takes me, as the Shadow Justice Secretary, to get out and about, I'm going to do that because I want the police and the authorities to be stepping up and taking action against each and every one of these problems.
But the public needs to be careful, don't they? I mean, I take your point particularly on loud music being played, but you don't really want to confront anybody, not least if they're young, because you wonder, in fact, when you were doing your fare dodging exercise, somebody threatened you and said that they had a knife on them. So the public have got to be careful, haven't they?
Yeah, look, I'm not asking members of the public to do what I did. It's my job to raise these issues. And some of these people are nasty people. As you say, somebody said they might have a knife amongst them when I spoke to them. What I want are the authorities to be taking action. So in the case of fare dodging, it's the enforcement officers. And when I was at Stratford Station, I saw 8 people not doing a great deal. There was even one bloke with his feet up on the counter, looking at his mobile phone when the gate was open. People were coming in and out. Probably some of them weren't paying. And, you know, on other issues, what is going on to tackle the epidemic of shoplifting right now in our country? All the phones that are being nicked out of people's hands when they're walking down the street, and even more serious crimes than that. Look what Labour is doing on these issues. They're making it worse. They've just announced that you are barely ever going to go to prison for sentences of 12 months or less. That means thieves, burglars, thugs who beat people up are not going to go to jail. And
Let's put
just
the
to finish this point, Camilla,
counter-argument.
the NCA, the National Crime Agency, the MI5, the police have said this is going to lead to a crime wave.
OK, well, let's put the counter-narrative, and it would be this. Theresa May's Home Secretary cut police numbers, and they've never recovered. And as far as the prison system's concerned, and I know you've got some ideas as how to better protect prison officers, you speak to anyone involved in the prison estate, and they'll say that another Tory, Chris Grayling, ruined our prisons. A load of experienced prison officers were forced into retirement. Now a load of inexperienced youngsters have been recruited, and unfortunately the lags are now in control, and this happened under Tories' rule.
Well, Camilla, you know that I am the first person to acknowledge the mistakes of the last Conservative government. I resigned from the Cabinet because I thought it was completely wrong that Rishi Sunak wouldn't take my advice on stopping the boats and wouldn't go further to bring down legal migration. But I am now the Shadow Justice Secretary. I'm interested in the present and the future and in what we can do to make this country a better place. And on prisons, I'm really worried that there is a mounting issue about prison officer safety and, in particular, Islamist gangs and terrorists in our prisons. I'm warning today that unless the government takes action, it is only a matter of time before a prison officer is held hostage and, God forbid, is actually killed. That's why I've commissioned Ian Aitchison, one of the most respected former prison governors in our country, to bring forward recommendations that I'm giving to the government today. They have to act now. And I'm saying, let's have the backs of those brave prison officers. Let's properly equip them so that specialist officers in our maximum security jails have lethal weapons. So if, God forbid, a prisoner has a gun, they can take action and regain control of that jail as quickly as possible. And every day, let's make sure those officers have high-collar stab vests. It's totally wrong that they don't have that. These are brave men and women doing a tough job, and I want them to be properly protected.
But if you're talking about prison officers carrying guns, what if the inmates do take control of the prison? What if the inmates do overpower prison officers and then the inmates are armed?
Well, we're talking here about specialist trained officers in maximum security jails, using these in the most difficult situations, going to a secure armoury, getting them so they can respond rapidly and regain control of the prison. Today, prison officers do go in with guns in these situations, but they have to call for backup to come to the prison, and that can take hours. Some of these maximum security jails, like Long Lartin and Worcestershire, are in very rural locations. I'm not prepared for our prison officers to be left in that situation. And Charlie Taylor, the Chief Inspector of Prisons, he warned at the beginning of the year this exact situation could happen. He said that drones could be used so that guns get into prisons and get into the hands of these dangerous prisoners and these Islamist terrorists that are now in our jails. And something very similar to that happened this week. It is alleged that a terrorist got hold of a knife brought in by a drone into Long Lartin prison and used that to stab a prison officer. So this is already happening. We saw Axel Rudakabana, the Southport killer. He allegedly attacked a prison officer. We saw Hashim Abedi, one of the terrorists who plotted the Manchester Arena bombing. He allegedly attacked a prison officer. This is getting worse and worse and worse. Enough is enough. Let's have the backs of these brave officers.
All right. But it probably could have been predicted that Islamist extremism was going to become an increasing problem in Britain's prisons, and yet under the Conservatives, you only created 28 isolation places for radical prisoners. That, in retrospect, was a grave mistake.
Well, we did create the separation centres, as you say,
but not
and
enough.
in fact, Ian Aitchison, who's written the report for me today, was the author of that policy. But we should have done more. You're absolutely right. We should have done more. Look, what we could do now is focus on the future, and the problem is getting significantly worse as there are more terror suspects, or more terrorists, not suspects, more convicted terrorists in our prisons today. At the moment, there are only 3 of these separation centres. One is closed. So there are precious few of these settings. What I want to do is restore solitary confinement. Let it mean solitary confinement, Camilla, not some kind of holiday camp where you have access to a kettle that you could boil water and use to attack a prisoner. I don't want there to be any privileges. We read in the papers this weekend that Axel Rudakabana is able to buy Maltesers and Haribo. This is pathetic. What would the victims of his crimes think about that? And certainly what would the prison officers think? I want these people to be in solitary confinement. I want the radicalising imams to be out of our prisons. Let's make sure all these people are properly security checked before they're let anywhere near these dangerous individuals.
All right, there's a couple of questions now because we're running out of time. Just on the Tories and reform, you had a meeting with Rupert Lowe. Are you accepting him into the Conservative Party, yes or no?
Look, I do know Rupert. We agree on many issues, including much to do with immigration, but that is not for me. He has to decide what his future is, and it's for Kemi as our leader to decide who is or isn't a member
But you'd happily have him in the fold?
It's not for me to decide that, Camilla.
Well, you must have an opinion as to whether you think he'd be a good Tory MP or not.
No, you're tempting me, but it isn't for me. It's for Kemi.
All right.
As our leader
how
to make
about
that
this
decision.
one for
But
you?
if I could say on reform, can I say on reform?
Very quickly. We're running out of time.
Look what's happened this week. Look what's happened this week. You've had, astonishingly, Nigel Farage getting into bed with Keir Starmer
and
on hiking the welfare bill, spending £3.5 billion.
Still, you won't win your seat in Newark because of the rise of reform in your own patch. That's why you have been much more right-wing than they used to be, because you know you have to be Faragian to have any hope in hell of being re-elected.
Look, no, that's not true, Camilla. But look at the last week. You've had Farage getting into bed on welfare bed. I know Nigel Farage likes a pint or two, but it feels to me as if he had one too many before he announced that he was going to spend £3.5 billion extra on welfare. And then you've got Zia Youssef, the chairman of Reform, doing this wacky cryptocurrency policy in Las Vegas. I mean, look, I'm all for innovation, but this is not the #1 priority of my constituents in Newark. I don't think Reform have the answers to the challenges this country faces. That is what I'm focused on.
All right, but the trouble is that they seem to refer Farage to Kemi Badenoch, and according to a Survation poll this morning, 2/3 of Conservative voters would prefer Boris Johnson to be leading the party. So not Kemi Badenoch and not even you, Robert Jenrick.
Well, look, Kemi Badenoch is the leader of our party. I'm right behind her. She's working hard to hold this government to account, and she's landing blows. Look what we've seen recently, where Labour have done this astonishing U-turn on the winter fuel payment, which was taking away money from some of the poorest pensioners in our society. That is what Kemi is doing. We know it's going to be a hard road ahead, but if we actually bring forward serious answers to the challenges this country faces, not get into bed with Keir Starmer on hiking welfare and taking thousands of pounds from savers and handing it to people so they can have their third, fourth and fifth child, I believe over time we can win back the trust and the confidence of the British public.
All right. Robert Jenrick, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Well, I'm going to put all that to Darren Grimes, previously of this parish, now a Reform councillor and maybe even a candidate to become a Reform MP one day. We'll be speaking to him next. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello, there's plenty of hot sunshine across most of the Mediterranean, but there are some thunderstorms in places, particularly in southern France. Across the Canary Islands and Madeira, though, there'll be this brisk northerly flow on Monday, bringing in quite a bit of cloud, but sunshine for southern parts of Spain. Here are those thunderstorms across the Alps, southern parts of France, but most of Italy, the Balkans and Greece and Turkey having plenty of hot sunshine and temperatures into the high 20s, and the outlook is for plenty more dry and settled weather.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No, because you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Nigel is back.
Good evening.
Unfiltered.
Are these proposals bold enough?
Uncompromising.
Will it bring growth?
Unmissable.
We as a country are brilliant.
Nigel Farage returns this Tuesday from 7 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The Reform UK councillor and deputy leader of Durham County Council, Darren Grimes, joins me now. Darren, lovely to see you this morning. Now, I don't know whether you caught my interview with Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, but he's accused Nigel Farage of getting into bed with Labour, suggesting that in his suggestion that he wants to end that two-child benefit cap, he's actually now become a proponent of Corbynista politics.
Look, do you know what? I will come to that, but I'm not going to take any lectures, frankly, from a Tory who's been there since the Cameron years, right? Stood by as a minister through several portfolios, when actually the Tories' idea for solving our demographic issues or family policy was to import millions through mass migration. And look how that's worked out. You know, you see in your good paper just this week, Camilla, that benefits claims by foreign nationals have doubled to a nearly £1 billion a month, £1 billion. That's their brilliant demographic strategy, from 461 million to 941 million in just 3 years. And that happened under their watch, under the Boris wave of mass migration. That was their solution. So, yeah, on the idea that we're suddenly some form of bleeding heart liberal or even socialists, I've had this put to me. Just last week, I was on another broadcaster, Camilla, and it was put to me that I'm a fascist. Now I'm a socialist. It seems people can't make up how they want to pigeonhole the Reform Party. And it's because we stand for one thing and one thing only, and that's the national interest, for common sense. The fact of the matter is here, Labour could lift 350,000 kids out of relative poverty tomorrow by scrapping the two-child benefit cap, but they won't. They'd rather keep this policy in place whilst lecturing everybody else about compassion and social justice. But if you come over here, as over 1,000 people just did yesterday, you come over here in a boat illegally, you'll get given absolutely everything for free. Yes. But if you have 3 children, Camilla, and you end up in a nasty divorce, and I've been there, I've known my family go through similar circumstance, and you end up being punished as a 3rd child. Do you think that's fair, right, or just? I certainly don't.
I take your point. I take your point on compassionate politics. But this is the reality of the situation. And do you know what? The British public aren't with Reform or Nigel Farage or you on this. 6 in 10 support the two-child benefit cap. Why? Because the benefit bill has gone up exponentially over the course of the last decade. It's up by £86 billion. You look at the pie chart of what happens to every pound that taxpayers earn, 31.8% goes on welfare. That's 10% more than all of the money we pay towards the NHS. It's totally unsustainable. It doesn't make political sense. I get the idea of supporting family-friendly tax policies. I get that. But the public isn't behind you. Most working-class people, by the way, think the cap should be in place because they're suspicious of people having children and gaming the system.
Absolutely. But what I would say to that is, Camilla, look at the other stats for Britain's birth rate, for example, 1.4 children per woman. I mean, we're on the path here to demographic extinction. The replacement rate has to be 2.1, which means obviously that we're not producing enough children to actually maintain our population. So I would say to people in a heartfelt plea, this isn't about statistics. This isn't about being a benefit state. And I agree the benefits bill itself ought to be reformed. Of course it should. But other countries are going hell for leather on this. Hungary restructured their entire economy around families. Japan quadrupled spending on family formation. South Korea threw $200 billion at the problem. We've got to do something about this, because whilst we're sitting here in British families today, they could disappear from tomorrow. We can't accept that decline here is inevitable, because the solution from Labour and the Tories would be mass migration, Camilla, and we simply don't want that.
The thing about immigrants is they tend to have more children. You're worried about the population of the UK. Why aren't you happy about people coming to this country, settling here, getting British citizenship and having loads of children?
Because I care about my own first, ultimately, right? I care about the people here. I care about the fact that there is a massive rank hypocrisy whilst the Labour Party are spending 4 to 5 billion quid on asylum seekers, so-called asylum seekers, whilst we're arguing here about scraps like the winter fuel payment and the 2-child benefit cap, right, which would amount to about a similar amount of cash. So the fact of the matter is we are not getting our priorities right, and we are choosing to prioritise foreigners over the British public. And I don't think that's where the British public are actually at either.
But are the British public in favour of big government spending plans like those that Reform have come out with this week? I've spoken to Andrew Lillico. He, as you know, he's a fair-minded economist. He looks very much at kind of parties on the right and looks at what they are planning to spend. And he's basically saying that we're now in an era where it doesn't matter whether you're Reform or Labour, it's all about high tax and spend. This isn't the Thatcherism that a lot of your supporters will be calling for.
No, so the policies would work hand in hand. So yes, we prioritise the British families expanding and having more kids, or even just getting started altogether. I hear so many people, I'm in County Durham, house prices are not as high as the rest of the country, but people struggle to get on the housing ladder, even up here. What chance do young families have? That's why we're not having children. So we work on a multi-policy front, which actually says, yeah, taxes are too high. They are not allowing people to actually earn enough money to have start a family. Net zero is immiserating the country. Factories are closing at a rate of knots. You've got Nissan and Sunderland talking about leaving, which would be a hammer blow for the northeast economy.
Okay.
So we work with, it is a multi-policy approach, Camilla, where yes, you have a benefit prioritisation of British families, but also you get rid of the absolutely insane policy agenda, which is bankrupting Britain and its families.
All right, Darren Grimes, thank you very, very much indeed for joining me this morning. I am back next week at 9:30 for more fun and frolics with politicians.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening and welcome to a GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, it's going to be drier on Monday, but turning wet and windy later on, and then rather changeable as we head through the rest of the week. So we've got low pressure across the north, but out towards the west, a ridge of high pressure is going to be building on Monday to help settle things down. So there are still some showers around this evening and overnight, chiefly across Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Wales, but they'll generally start easing as we go through the night, so plenty of clear spells and lighter winds, and there's a chance of seeing the northern lights further towards the north, turning chilly in places but milder across the south, lows 6 to 11 degrees. So as we start Monday morning, actually a bright start across eastern parts of Scotland, plenty of sunshine here, cloudier out towards the west with a few showers, but generally most places waking up to a dry start. Northern Ireland, plenty of sunny spells to start the day. There will be a few showers just running into Wales, but elsewhere across much of England and Wales, it is a fine dry start with plenty of sunshine. So as we go through the morning and into the afternoon, actually the focus for any showers are going to be across parts of Yorkshire and East Anglia as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere, plenty of sunny spells on offer, but the sun will turn increasingly hazy as we go through the afternoon across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, in association with this area of low pressure. We have a brisk breeze as well developing, so cooler here, but in the sunshine feeling pleasant. Through Tuesday then, we have heavy spells of rain and strong winds moving their way south and eastward, so lingering across southeastern England. Behind that, it is a case of sunny spells, frequent blustery showers, some of these heavy, possibly thundery, even with some snow on the Scottish mountains. Then it remains rather changeable with further spells of heavy rain on Thursday. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could be our biggest winner yet, touring in this stylish Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. This brand new 2025 model comes complete with kitchen and bathroom areas and enough space to comfortably sleep a family of 4. We'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to add a few of your favourite things. Don't miss out as lines close on the 6th of June. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50.